It's Adam here for PC Monitors, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the AOC G2460Pg's OSD on-screen display menu system. Before getting on to that, I'm sure many of you will be wondering about the little green stripe here that AOC has added to the monitor. It's a fairly bold touch here, NVIDIA green, sort of lime green there. You can also see the same sort of colour used on the cable tidy clip here. Unless you've got the monitor a bit lower down, then you can't see that. I have to say, this is something that some people aren't going to like very much. Other people will like it. The stripe is painted on, so you can't remove it. The clip can just be clipped off if you don't like it. But to be honest, I don't mind it. I don't find it distracting at all when I'm using the monitor, and I actually sort of warm to it a bit. Another few little green features you'll see are the little crosshair icon there and the ULMB, which stands for ultra low motion blur. And unlike the rest of the OSD controls, which you can see are just sort of engraved onto the monitor there, these features actually stand out quite well. So there are little buttons quite nicely spaced out here, which you can press. They're not touch sensitive or anything like that, and they control the OSD of the monitor and the other sort of features. So the first one, as you might imagine from that symbol, if you press that, it enables the on-screen crosshair, or disables it if you press it again. I'm not really a massive fan of the crosshair. You can change the design. If you press the second button here, you can select 6 different crosshairs, and I don't really like any of them. This isn't a feature I personally use. I prefer just a sort of simple dot or cross, something a bit more accurate, but you know, the feature's there if you want to use it. Third button along here, ULMB, as you would expect, enables and disables the ultra low motion blur feature of the monitor, and as it says here, ULMB only possible at 85 Hz, 100 Hz or 120 Hz. At the moment I'm running the monitor at 144 Hz, so I can't enable that feature. But if I just quickly change to 120 Hz here, should be able to show you that. Okay, so that says ULMB off. Press it again, ULMB on. Off, on. I think you get the idea. The next button along opens the main menu, the main OSD of the monitor, and then there's a power button there. So if I just show you the main OSD, it's a bit rough around the edges. It's not polished, which you sort of should really expect from a modern AOC monitor. They never really have the flashiest menu systems, but somehow this looks a bit more rough around the edges than usual. You also notice that there are some AOC specific features which are cut off. Because this monitor is a G-Sync monitor, it has a G-Sync module instead of some of the accessory electronics that you might typically find, which would give you manufacturer specific features. For example, AOC has their bright frame feature, which is not on this monitor. There's no dynamic contrast function on this monitor, and there isn't clear view, which adjusts the sharpness either. Fortunately, they have kept a few key features which I personally find very useful. For example, there's a gamma setting and also adjustable pixel overdrive function there. So the first menu, Luminance, allows you to adjust the contrast, the brightness and the gamma mode and overdrive setting, as I've just discussed. So there are 3 different gamma modes which are discussed in the review: gamma 1, gamma 2 and gamma 3. The overdrive settings, there's light, which is my preferred option, medium, which is the default, strong, off, and also weak. So it's quite adjustable, which is quite nice to see. So everyone has their own little preferences there. Next up there is the color setup menu, which basically just allows you to adjust the red, green and blue color channels. You can user configure these as I've done there, or you can set them to one of the predefined values, for example warm, which is the default, normal, cool, sRGB, and the user mode, which allows you to configure them as I was doing. Next is the Osd Setup section of the menu, and that allows you to adjust some basic parameters of the Osd, for example what language it's displayed in, and the timeout period, so that's how long it's going to be displayed for after the last button press before it disappears on its own. Of course, if you'd like to make it disappear yourself manually, you can of course just press the first button on the monitor here, which acts as an exit as well. And of course the second and third button, I should have really mentioned before, that they don't just allow you to cycle through the crosshairs or activate ULMB. When you're on the main menu, they also act as the left and right or next and previous functions as well. So get back to the Osd Setup menu there. You can also adjust the transparency of the menu system, so you can have that so it's completely opaque, or you can have it slightly transparent as it is by default, or if you prefer you can have it even more transparent, whichever you like. There's also a break reminder feature, which will essentially just let you know when you've been on the computer for an hour, or you've had the screen on for an hour. It'll just remind you to take a little break, rest your eyes, that sort of thing. Finally, there's the extra menu, which allows you to perform a factory reset all of the settings to default. Well, I say all of the settings, you have to be a bit careful with that because it doesn't reset the color setup, user adjusted color setup. So if you've manually adjusted the red, green and blue channels and you want to get them back to the default, then don't expect that reset function to bail you out, because it doesn't actually reset them. So just be a bit careful with that. It's also a warning that I've issued in the review. And the other feature on this extra menu is ULMB, ultra low motion blur. If I enable that, first thing you'll notice is that there's an alternating pattern you'll probably see on this video of dark and light lines very slowly moving up the screen. You don't actually see that in person. You can't actually see these obvious strobing effects. It's just an artifact on the video, but it's there because the screen is flickering. It's not flicker free when you've got the ULMB mode on. It's a strobe backlight mode, and as explained in the review, that changes how the backlight is controlled. And one setting which you can change if you've got ULMB on is the pulse. It says plus width, that should actually say pulse width setting, which basically just brightens or dims the image and changes the motion clarity. It's another feature that's explored in the review. And I should also mention, if you're running the monitor in 3D mode, which I will just enable now. So see here I've got the NVIDIA 3D 2 emitter. So I've got the NVIDIA 3D Vision 2 kit, which again is looked at in the review if you're interested in 3D. So if I enable Stereoscopic 3D, it says it is enabled. That's okay. So test Stereoscopic 3D. Once you're in Stereoscopic 3D mode, you have slightly different settings here. You can see NVIDIA Light Boost, which is basically the brightness control which you have when the monitor's in 3D mode. So I like to just leave that at max, but it can slightly improve the motion clarity if you reduce that a bit, much like the pulse width setting of ULMB. Although personally I find it absolutely fine at max, and I prefer higher brightness over even better than already excellent motion clarity. So there you go. And that was the AOC G2460Pg's OSD on-screen display menu system. Make sure you look at the review on pcmonitors.info for much more about the monitor, see how it performs. And one last thing I'm going to do before I completely forget is to put this cable tidy back on, because unlike some people I don't find the green particularly offensive. Beautiful.